Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Women in Leadership Talk podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We have Dr. Anju Virmani. So, Anju, thank you so much for being here and sharing your wealth of knowledge with us. We're grateful to have you.
I am delighted to be here, and I'm happy to share whatever bits of knowledge that I've gained through my long journey in life with all the young ones and the old ones and everybody.
Well, terrific. And we're thrilled to have you here. So appreciate you being here. And let's take a moment. I want to thank our audience for being here. You know, we're being listened to in over 48 countries. And, you know, we're really grateful to be listened to, you know, very far and wide. And, you know, today's conversation, we're going to be focused around male allyship and women on boards. So I think you'll find this conversation interesting. And please do share the episode, you know, with your friends and who you think would find value in the conversation that we're going to have. So before we go there, let me just give you a little bit of insight as to, you know, Dr. Virmani's background, so you have a sense of why I've invited her on the show today. She has a huge background in technology, engineering, sits on a number of boards. And, you know, one of the things that struck me as so important is she is leveraging her expertise in technology to help drive change within the boards that she sits on, which one of those would be Payments Canada. She's on Ontario Power Generation and Ontario Health. She's contributed to strategic direction, oversight, and governance of these critical public sector entities. And that's really important that we've got women who are having such an impact on boards that are life-changing for many of us. She's also recognized as one of the top 100 most powerful women in Canada and received a doctorate of engineering on her outstanding technology leadership and social impact. And her mission is really to provide risk management, good governance, using technology and digital solutions to solve complex business problems. So, Dr. Virmani, thank you again for being here. We're excited to, you know, just to hear some of your thoughts around women on boards and male allyship. But let's start with maybe your background. Why engineering? What drove you to pick that as a career?
Okay, so you know, sometimes we pick an education and we kind of think we're going to end up in a field that we originally went to school for. My family was always, I migrated to Canada when I was 20 years old. And by the time I came here, I already had an education, a degree, a BSc from India and a Bachelor of Education, but none of that was recognized in Canada. So I had to basically take up menial jobs and do all kinds of things until I got more local education that was recognized. And when I came here, my background was in, believe it or not, child education and working with children with disabilities.
Oh, wow.
And I realized I did that for a few years when I first came, but then I realized that in order to get ahead, and I hate to say this, it's in those days, these professions made very little money. I could not sustain myself on my own with the income I made, and I was looking to see how I could sustain myself and my children, because I came to Canada for a better life. And I realized that I had to be doing computer programming. So I asked a bunch of males around me, and you know, this will bring me directly into their opinions. These males were engineers, you know, electrical, computers, whatever. And I was very discouraged. They said, you can't do it. It's going to be too much for you. I don't think you can handle it. There was a lot of discouragement. And I said, okay, but all the jobs that I would like to apply for that would make me self-sufficient and financially able to sustain myself, they all are in technology. So I took a chance. I took an aptitude test and I went and took a course in programming. I've never looked back.
Nice.
That was the beginning. And you can call it, so I didn't actually have a degree in engineering, but the work I did was that of a software computer engineer. So it evolved into a role in engineering. And, you can think of engineering, every aspect of our life is engineered, It's about problem solving, it's about recognizing problems, it's about finding solutions that are sustainable. And I have to say that, I started very early in my career in technology. And I would date myself when I say that I actually started just as the IBM punch cards were going out of style.
Okay.
Okay. So I started with languages like assembler and COBOL. And by the way, if I went back to work as a COBOL programmer now, I'd make a ton of money
Yeah.
because we are an extinct population. And by the way, those systems still work great.
Wow.
So that's how engineering came along. And I realized that engineering is not just about, building bridges and building highways and nuclear engineering, but my interest in solving problems that were relevant and that had an impact not only on organizations, but also on life in our society. I just continued to push that. And along the way, I realized that a lot of the times I was one of the only women in a room with technology background. And I had to learn to find my place on that table and be able to talk about what I was able to share from my experiences and my knowledge. And it was not easy. It still is not easy. This is like coming down 40 years later. It's still not easy for a lot of women to be in that role. And I started to, as I got more comfortable in my life and my children were taken care of, and I said, okay, how do I give back? So I started doing some scholarships at Ryerson University, now known as TMU. And these scholarships for women in STEM programs who were in the third year of engineering, any kind of STEM program at Ryerson. And I was advised that it was in the third and fourth year that times became really challenging for these women. That's when all the OSAP ran out, the work became more difficult, they had to go back to work. There was a lot of issues. There is a lot of issues that students face. And these were mostly women who some of them were from marginalized families. They were from, they didn't have parents who could afford to put them through university. So we started to set up those scholarships in STEM. And then I started to mentor those young recipients. And then we started to do scholarships for women in a PhD program, the first cohort of BIPOC women in a PhD program at TMU for urban health, which by now I had developed a relationship with TMU, and they could identify needs where a little bit of my money would have a bigger impact. And then we did some scholarships for the LGBTQ community in community services, anybody who was in those services. And I think that was the social impact kind of stuff that and my mentoring that led TMU to honor me with an honorary doctorate in engineering. The only thing that I don't have from an engineering is my ring. And I would really like to get one of those rings, but I'm still working on it.
Wow, good for you.
Yeah.
Wow, you've definitely had an impact that is wide stretching and in so many ways. And so thank you for that. And recognizing the need in, where people are and meeting them where they are and helping them to push beyond those barriers.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to you with even, when you came to Canada and having to sort of start over with education and, pushing through that because you wanted a better life. And that's you know, that just speaks a lot to your character. So thank you. Thank you for what you're doing with respect to women in particular. But, you know, one of the things that I found really interesting, when I invited you to come on the show and have a conversation with me, like you've worked in some heavy, heavy male dominated industries. And
I have, that's true.
yeah, yeah, and it's almost, we've almost swung the pendulum too far, right? And so now we're in this situation of how do we kind of meet in the middle? And you talked about allyship. It was in some it was in a conversation I had read that you had done with the importance of male allyship and how you've navigated those male dominated industries and made connections that have enabled you to have more allies. Can you talk a little bit about that with us?
So, when you look at the spectrum of people in an organization and, or you look at life in society, we have males and we have females and we have other genders these days, which, so people are free to be whoever they are. It is, when you look at the power distribution in an organization, you'll see that a lot of the positions of power belong to men.
Yes.
And when you look at empowering the other half of the spectrum, how do you not involve the males in giving power back to women or helping them realize by creating safe spaces? And how can you ignore the male factor in female empowerment, in females reaching their potential? And I actually don't like to use the word empowerment because to me, that implies that somebody else is going to give you the power, that you don't have it. The fact is that the power is within us. We just don't have the right environment to express that power. And power is not being about, oh, I'm superior than you. It's being able to openly discuss your ideas and feel welcome and listened to.
Yeah.
So the incident that you're referring to is a recent incident, and I was invited to an event where it was to celebrate the festival of Diwali, where there was, and when I got to the event, I was the only woman, and there were like 40 men. And so me being me, I just, after the welcome speech, I kind of said, I really wish there was more. Now, Diwali is symbolic of the goddess of wealth, Lakshmi. And I almost brought it to that level. And I said, there's only one Lakshmi in here. I'm the only woman in here. And that's, I wish all of you men would think about bringing a female coworker, a companion, somebody who would come to this event and feel part of the conversation. And what was the interesting outcome of that was, of course, all the males applauded me for speaking up, and some even came and said that it was that they have daughters and they want a safe world for their daughters, but not a single one came and said, I have boys. How do I train my boys to be to be welcoming and to find equality in gender relationships? So I often like to speak about that topic. And one of the things I think when you're looking for male allies is that I don't think males understand the role they can play. And the first part being is, do they even realize what a privilege they have of being a male? The gender privilege is amazing. It gives them a lot of power, which traditionally has been actually taken away from women.
Yeah.
In different cultures and different societies. And so how do you navigate male, bringing that into the current situation? How do women in male dominated fields um, handle themselves and be productive members of the organization and society, is where they have a safe environment, where they're listened to, where they're heard. So how can males help?
Yeah.
Listen to us, realize the privilege you have, realize the power you have, and make opportunities for women to feel safe. If there's an opportunity, think about a woman you can bring up, but not just because she's a woman. So that brings me to the point where you have to start developing a pipeline of equal male, female children who have been raised to believe they can be whatever they want to be. And there should be no such fields as male-dominated fields and female-dominated fields, which, by the way, again, has been a situation prompted by society, perhaps for a reason, but maybe those reasons don't exist anymore, and we need to reevaluate those reasons that things came along.
Yeah.
So that's one of my favorite topics these days. And what else can I tell you?
Well, I love what you've shared. And so interesting because I have a boy and a girl.
Yes.
And
so do I.
Right. And so it does help you look at it from both perspectives, right? And I've often asked my son, what do you think it is you can do that your sister can't do? And I've asked her the same, right? And it's so interesting because my son, and of course, this was several years ago before he went off to university, but he always said, she can do everything I do. The only difference, Mom, is that physically I'm stronger, right? But I think we forget, right, that there should be more of this harmony between the genders. And I love what you've shared today on many different accounts, because it is about being intentional. And, to your point, bring a woman with you to the event, or if you're sitting in a executive meeting and someone starts speaking over the woman who's making that point, think about, why is that happening, right? Maybe that person is trying to amplify her voice or maybe they're being intentional to cut her off. But we have to be able to unpack those things and understand what the motives really are, and how do we begin validating and listening more actively to each other.
So active listening, the power of listening is really critical. And a lot of us hear things, but we don't listen.
Yeah.
When you listen to someone, you actually have to give you more than 100% of yourself, because you really have to pay attention to not just what they're saying, what their body language is, what their facial expressions are, because that's a whole complete conversation, right?
That's right.
And I think as women, we need to tell men how to treat us, when they're not listening to us, when they are kind of mansplaining things to us, when they're cutting us off, or not giving us oxygen in a conference room, or taking our ideas and presenting them as their own, right? I mean, if you look at if you look at social media posts, and if you look at what some people are posting on LinkedIn, is how their male bosses take their ideas and take credit for it.
Sure.
That could happen to, not just by men. It could happen.
I was just going to say that it can be both. Yes.
It can be both. But when somebody in power does that, whether it's a male or a female, it's even more significant because they already have the power. And this was an opportunity for a woman or a man to shine and put forth their qualifications, their ability to perform, and it was taken away.
Yeah. And that's good leadership, when you are acknowledging whoever, male, female, doesn't matter, on your team, right? That, Anju just, she pulled this project together or was able to do X, Y, Z. Like, that's a great leader who amplifies their people.
Yes.
And so that's, I think everything we're talking about is really about being intentional. And one thing I'll share, Anju, is I did an event in Ottawa not too long ago, and my focus has really been about women, right?
Mm,
But I've
yes.
seen this pendulum swing, and so I definitely am shifting even my own conversations to make sure that our male allies are part of the conversation, because we're not going to change anything unless
No,
that's the case, right?
absolutely. Mhm.
But what was so fascinating at this event that we did was the first time we had 50-50 representation.
That is
And
amazing.
right, and we were talking about male allyship, and what I so loved about this conference or this event was the men were leaning in. They wanted to hear, how do we become better allies? Like, I'm looking around the room and there's heads nodding, and it's not just about your daughters, it's about your sons as well, and really amplifying those conversations so that we, to your point, what you said, it's recognizing the privilege that you have and how do you bring others along on the journey. There is enough for all of
Yes.
us.
Totally agree. Totally agree. So, talking about, again, recognizing that privilege, whether it comes from gender, whether it comes from race, whether it comes from having a higher education, whether it's about having more opportunities open doors for you because you belong to the boys' golf club, or, that itself are privileges that sometimes men do not even realize they have. And so I have a girlfriend who is a psychologist, and we often talk about doing sessions for men.
Mhm.
And we always talk about, do you think men would come if we taught them to be better allies, or to recognize in themselves? And we always debate that. And I think they would come, and I think it would be really helpful. But I leave that to my psychologist friend to do. I do what I do in an advocacy role.
Well, and you have such a good influence because you have walked along the path with them, right? And so you see those who have been good allies and those who potentially have not. And that's true both male and female. And so we're not, this is really about how do we help men become more comfortable in the
Yeah.
conversations. I remember when the Me Too movement first started, my accountant, he and I had worked together for about 25 years, and I adored this man. And we had a lunch meeting, and he said to me when he walked up, he said, "Is it okay if I hug you?" Like, I'm like, "You've been hugging me for 25 years." And he's like, "I know
Yes.
things have changed, right?" Now, I said, "Thank you for asking, but we're friends, right?" And so I think there is some of that still that's happening. Like, people are afraid to, like, how, I mean, of course, you're not just going to walk up to a stranger and hug them. That's not the point. But it's finding and asking, right? What are you comfortable with? Because there's different levels with all of us.
Yes. You mentioned just now that people see me as a woman of influence, or as a woman,
Mhm.
as a role model. And I never really thought of myself, no, as being a role model, or, um, that's not one of the goals. I want to be a role model, right?
Okay.
That's something that happens as a result of all your collective life actions and where you happen to be. And I did not realize that until I was approached um, to be nominated for the top 100 most powerful women in Canada. And honestly, I don't know what that really means. How do I exercise this power that I have? But I realized that in our communities, it's important for women to see role models who don't look like them. I'm a woman of color. I am in a field that's male dominated. And And I've transitioned from, and I've transitioned several times from my traditional, from what I thought was a career to the next level of my career, evolution, the digital journey, these are all terms that I think, our life is a journey. There's no such thing as I'm going to be this when I grow up. But I also realize that I'm a role model for young men, because a lot of the people I mentor are young men, and some of them are friends of my children. Some of them are people that I meet in networking sessions. And I take that role of a mentor seriously, which was not what I had intended to do. But when I was working as the chief information officer for Cargojet, most of my team, my technology team, was mostly male and mostly people of color, because I made it a point to hire newcomers who had the technical experience and the desire to learn and grow, and not maybe necessarily have the skill set that I was looking for. It was the adaptability and the attitude. And we did very successful projects at Cargojet. And when it came time to take a bow, it was, my comments were always, this was done by the wonderful teamwork and the people that are part of this team. My job was to provide an environment where they could thrive and feel safe and experiment. And, they always said, we couldn't have done it if you hadn't provided the leadership for us. So, acknowledgement, and these were mostly males. And I'm happy to say that since I left, one of my mentees has taken over my role. And it's a pleasure to see that whatever I could impart to them as our learning, as we grew together as a team, was wonderful. And it continues to be. So, but then transitioning from, I think one of the things you mentioned was that I retired. And I like to say I'm just getting started.
Well, I was going to say, you're not really retired, because you're sitting on a number of boards, and
yes,
you're still influencing, and even in a larger way. And that's a great segue for us to talk about, because that is also, and I hate to even use this word, it is a gap that women are not nominated for boards the way, at the same level that men are, because they do have that privilege. And so, I know our audience would be curious of, like, how you've created stage 2, because this is the next act.
Yeah. So stage 2, was created long before I got to stage 2. So I started getting interested in governance issues way back in 2007. And one thing I advise all women and all men to do is invest in yourself. I went to McMaster's the Director College program. I think I was probably one of the first cohorts to graduate in 2007.
Nice.
And I invested in myself by taking that course. And the other thing, and I'm going to tell all women to do this, is that when you have an opportunity and you have something to say, speak up. Because I was doing that and I was networking, I was invited to an Indo-Canadian roundtable with the then Prime Minister, Mr. Stephen Harper. And he wanted to meet successful Indo-Canadians and see how he could, how they could integrate the communities and what this community could bring to the broader Canadian community.
Nice.
Now, that's more than 20 years ago. And a couple of my male allies brought 2 women into that group of like 15, 17 males. And there were 2 of us in that group. And we were given, each one of us was given 1 minute to ask the Prime Minister a question. So my question to him was, and it's because I was afraid, my voice was trembling. I was in a group of males, and there was the Prime Minister and there was his whole entourage, and there were all these very successful businessmen around me. But I did ask that question, which was, how does your government incorporate all the knowledge and wisdom that's in a room like this?
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any policies? How do you create representation of Canadians with this subset of Canadians, right? And he gave a very nice diplomatic political answer, but 2 weeks later, I got a call from the PMO, which is the Prime Minister's office, asking me to join an advisory roundtable on national security. And I'm saying, what do I know about national security? I'm just a technology person. However, they had done their homework. So transportation security it's a national security issue. It was even 25 years ago. And so was technology risk, which is what keeps coming up on boards these days.
Mm-hmm.
So Mr. Harper was, his team was way ahead. They had foresight, that, and they brought me into this roundtable, which was full of silver-haired men and one brown woman.
Interesting.
But that was, if I put that picture up on LinkedIn now and say what year it is, you'd probably say it's still 2024.
Yeah.
And although I have to say we have come a long way, if you look at the numbers, number of women on corporate boards now is way ahead of where it was 20 years ago. But there's still a gap, there's a gender gap. One woman on a board is good. 3 is wonderful, right? So we need to still get to, and it shouldn't be about just being the gender. It should also be about the skill set.
Oh, absolutely. It has to be.
How do you get the skill set? Unless you start training them when they are young.
That's right.
Right?
100%.
So you got to get to the grassroots level, and you can tell your children, you can be anything you want to be. There's no such rules as, oh, the girl is going to be a nurse and she's going to live in pink and, have a prince gun. That would be nice too,
Yes, but not really realistic.
Not really realistic. So let's live in current times. And so my first opportunity came with the Prime Minister's office. And then I started to develop and be out there. But what I did for me was speak up and be present and try to be heard.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and I also hear you have a level of curiosity because through a number of things you've shared today, whether it be Ryerson or now TMU, whether it be Stephen Harper, asking the right questions becomes really important. So it's not that you have to be the smartest person in the room and know all the answers. It's really about how do you ask the right questions to open that line of communication and conversation, which sounds like that's why you got invited to join the advisory council, right? With national security.
Yeah, and I learned a lot. And then there was the public safety aspect of national security. So then I got invited to join the cross-cultural roundtable on national security, because the concepts that the advisory council put together, now they had to be implemented on Canadians. And how does it affect how does it affect the Canadians that look different? So one roundtable was, like I described, silver hair. The other one was all people. It was the United Nations.
Nice.
It's all that's represented in Canada.
Well, I was going to say that's what our country is all about, right?
Yes.
And so when we are making policy or decisions, it should be a representation of all the people that are made up of this country.
Yes.
And I think there is some shift in that happening. And so I'm grateful that you're sitting on a number of boards where you're able to have that voice and impact just how we start to look at things, right? Because if nobody asks the questions, then we continue to do what we've always done, hoping we'll get a different outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
But, boards these days are looking at diversity, not just in the boardroom, in the executive leadership, but all the way all the way down to the trenches. And how do you get women or representation and senior leadership if you don't cultivate them?
100%.
Right.
Yes.
And that comes to the board as succession planning.
Yes.
So succession planning is not just for the CEO, it's all the way down. How do you backfill positions, right? So boards are looking at very, very important things. That's setting the culture of the organization. If you're looking at diversity as one of the things that you want to be known for, you want to be a fair employer, you want to be a corporate citizen, and you're doing everything you can about sustainability, about getting to net zero. There is so much risks that the boards are dealing with in developing the new economy, the new country, with the challenges that we have right now. And I often like to talk about this, is boards are coming up, are recognizing risks that we've never heard of before. The geopolitical risk of the world war, the wars that are happening, the people that are affected, the immigration that's coming in, the refugees that are coming in, and you talk that up with the threat or the promise of AI, right? And one of the posts that I made this morning was, it had nothing to do with AI, it had to do with the human experience. And sometimes I wonder if AI, which is artificial intelligence, is it really artificial? Because it's really programmed by human beings.
By human beings, that's right. And are the right human beings programming?
So artificial intelligence is not really artificial. It's a machine doing your work. The ones that you don't want to do are repetitive, and to get a competitive advantage. So talking about also getting on boards, I have to say that one of the boards that I'm on, I was one of the candidates that I knew the board chair, because I had worked with him in a previous board. And so the allyship kicked in. Said, I know Anju, I have worked with her, and I think she would be a good fit. We need somebody with a technology background. We need somebody who understands cybersecurity, who understands digital. And one of the things that I often talk about is the composition of board members, male or female, that have different skill sets. So if you look at board, there's finance, there's HR expertise, there's legal expertise. Diversity on boards is not just about those professions, but also you have the right age. Age is also a very diverse factor. Somebody with disabilities, so these are people who bring diverse views.
Sure.
And you need them if you're going to be a successful organization.
100%.
Diversity brings value to an organization at every level. So whether it be gender, race, color, skill set, and I know we've kind of diverged into different topics, but
no, that's good, because you brought it back to, even like on the board, it was an ally who, so to me, just to kind of summarize, I've heard a number of things that, part of it is the connections, the networking, using your voice in a very influential way. So, and that doesn't mean you're selling people from our audience perspective.
When you say you're using your voice in an influential way, when you're young, it's not in an influential way. It's just to be heard.
Correct.
Then as you get heard and you kind of refine your voice, you get to be heard more.
Exactly.
You also have to have the intelligence or the emotional quotient to read the room.
Yes. Well, I was going to say that because you talked about even earlier when we were talking about the active listening, which is something that, that's part of, what I teach emerging leaders and even executives on, really active listening and picking up on those cues, which you brought into the conversation, because it's not just about hearing the words, it's about, what are the things.
Ingesting those words. Yes.
Exactly. So you've highlighted a number of I think really important topics, and we could have another podcast
Absolutely.
on artificial intelligence. We could have one on just women on boards.
I would love to do that.
Yeah, I think that, so much incredible information to share with our audience. And, I want to thank you for being here today and just being so giving with your time and your knowledge, because when somebody hears the journey that you've had, and I loved when you said, I'm just beginning. I think that's
I'm just getting started. Yes. And I also, just on the one male allyship thing that people often ask me if I've had allies, advocates, and I have had some in very initially, but male ally in those days came at a price.
Mm.
There were conditions, and I had to protect myself.
Of course.
I needed the help, but I was not willing to pay the price. And does that mean that I could have been further ahead? Possibly. But that was not my moral compass, and that was not how I wanted to get ahead. So I think some of that has already changed. I think, after the Me Too movement, people are more conscious of that.
100%, yes.
And I think that's something that men and women need to be aware of, that because you're in a position of power, you are in a position to take advantage. Yes. And please think about it before you do that.
Yes, 100%. You have a responsibility as a leader to lead, not to coerce.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, Anju, this has been fantastic. I want to be respectful of your time, and thank you for everything you've shared today. And I want to take a moment and thank our audience. We're super grateful to you being here today and listening into the conversation, and leave us a review. Let us know, or if you have questions for Dr. Virmani, what would be the best way for them to reach out if they had questions for you?
Reach out to me on LinkedIn and we will get connected. And I have to say that, LinkedIn is a very amazing platform. Every time I do a post, 20 more people reach out to me with questions, with asking for more information, and I'm happy to share, give to as many people as I can.
Thank you. So you heard it. You can reach Dr. Virmani, Dr. Anju Virmani on LinkedIn. She'll answer your questions as best she can. So I want to thank you again for being here today. And if you have questions about your own leadership, please go on to our wilempowered website and take our free leadership quiz, because it'll give you some insight as to how you're showing up as a leader. So Dr. Virmani, thank you again for being here. This has been great. And yes, let's you and I talk offline about the next podcast. Way too much to share in one.
Thanks for having me, Vicki.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Take care. Bye-bye.